It's KR King of D&D Homebrew, talking today about ways you can use signs and omens in your world to not just build flavor, but to point the way towards storylines and give the players a sense that things in the world are happening that are beyond them. Because, in the real world, for, tens of thousands of years, people have taken bizarre natural phenomenons or events and seen them as portents of things. If there is, some strange meteorological phenomenon, and then there's a plague that hits, they know that that phenomenon was a warning, was a sign that things were bad. There's a connection to the events that happened to us and these unrelated events in the natural world. And even, for hundreds of years, we've known there is no connection, and yet something in us, when there is some weird event, people then, anytime there's anything, there's a tendency to associate it. It's in our DNA. It's in our storytelling DNA. And that's why it's such a powerful tool to use, say, in a fantasy RPG setting, because in fact, they are portents. There are omens. There are things that happen that tell us the gods are angry about something, or some strange phenomenon is about to occur that could, alter everything in the world. Or it may give clues to something about storylines and histories and, events that are occurring, occurred in the past and are occurring now. All sorts of stuff that you can use by having signs and omens, portents in your world. And you can tie these into the mechanics of your game, like skill checks and things, such that the players, some of the skills that might seem a little more flavor-oriented or, with characters that are more support characters can suddenly come to the fore because their abilities are really useful in deciphering omens and figuring out what this portent really means. So I'm going to use the classic astronomical phenomenon of the blood moon, right, as an example. And obviously this has always captured the public's imagination because it's got blood in the title, right? Because the moon, during a full lunar eclipse, if the sunlight reflects just right, the moon appears a blood red color. It's a full moon too, right? Now, unfortunately, a lot of times the blood moon, you're not in a place to see it, or it's cloudy, or it doesn't really look, that red, and people get disappointed by this. Oh, but not in a fantasy game. If you've got a blood moon, it's going to be a harvest-style moon right over the horizon, and it's almost going to be dripping with blood. And so you're going to have this phenomenon. Now, first of all, does it just suddenly appear to the planet? All of a sudden, everyone looks in the sky, and there it is. I think you're reducing the power of that. I think first what you want with a blood moon is the players discover omens and prophecies that suggest when the next blood moon appears in the sky, some event's going to happen, some cataclysmic thing, and such that the players then investigate and figure, when was the last blood moon? Is there a history of them at a regular period? And you could just say, perhaps not really, no one knows when they appear. Or you could say, well, there isn't going to be a blood moon for another 50 years. But the players are getting this information from something. Maybe they found a tablet. Maybe they've heard a prophecy by some old beggar or something. Or, maybe that some phenomenon has occurred. All the birds in the sky are suddenly streaming overhead, doing something highly unusual. The animals in the forest are doing strange things. These are signs of something. And the prophecy, some old beggar comes and says, when the animals flee and the snakes appear in the street, then will come the final blood moon and the gates to hell will be open. It doesn't have to be quite that dramatic. It can be. But now the players have had prophecies. And again, they hear prophecies from the crazy beggar and they're going to think something's up, right? Or they find tablets from something that describes the events of the blood moon 500 years ago, where the birds flew through the sky, there was rumblings, and frogs fell from. That's a classic, omen of something. Man, I'm thinking of them right and left, right? And these things begin to happen. And what is the end prophecy? Is it something, literally biblical, like the firstborn child will die on this night of the blood moon? I don't know. I think, to me, it would be more like, all the dead shall rise for one night during the blood moon and wreak havoc, right? And they get this information. They find this and the blood moon is coming. You can have a fixed date if you want, or you can say that as the signs line up and this blood moon appears, something very bad is going to happen. Now, when you have something like this blood moon, in reality, of course, we can't stop this at all. There's nothing we can do, right? And probably you're not going to be able to stop. I mean, again, those are godlike powers to stop the movement of the, heavens or whatever. But the players can be prepared for this, and there can be a terrestrial connection to the power of the blood moon. There can be a way that the players discover some item or invoke some prayer or do a different tasks or do something where they can reduce the effects that we will be protected. If you wear this amulet, your family will be immune, right? Drawing on the door frame, something such that the players will be able to mitigate the effects of the blood moon or even eliminate them. Perhaps it's an ongoing curse, right? This town did something evil, sacrificed someone, turned their back on someone, and now every blood moon, the firstborn child is taken. Or it's something even more, there hasn't been a blood moon in a long time, and suddenly the players begin to realize there could be. No one believes this, but they feel like it's true. Now, here's the thing with these kind of omens and prophecies. You got to be careful about red herrings. If you do prophecies and then they don't come true, the players aren't going to necessarily believe in them. Because, in fact, the prophecies they're only right after the fact in the real world. Every psychic predicted Kennedy's assassination after the fact, right? So, the players need to know that if they're seeing omens, they're seeing prophecies, it has some connection to real events. But they're going to either interrupt the cycle. So I'm using the blood moon as a bad thing. They're going to interrupt something that occurs, the firstborn child, or there's going to be a plague, or the dead are going to rise up and wreak havoc. And maybe that blood moon lasts, a week or a month, or maybe it stops time. However, whatever the scale is of this, what this prophecy, this omen is predicting, the players can stop it. The other thing, of course, is at a blood moon at a certain site, you can see the entranceway to some other realm, right? To some, treasure that's in some valley. That's a classic, right? That it reflects the light at a full moon with this, it has to be in the silver light of something, sort of an elven type thing. So that's where the players get a prophecy and an omen. I tend to tie these to a positive negative vibe, right? Where if you do this, you might get something positive, but if you ignore it or allow something to happen, often there's a negative thing. Because you're talking, especially an astrological event that is very rare or is a sign of some power that's growing, some sign of demonic forces are gathering beyond the material plane. And the prophecy says, when the moon drips with blood, so shall come this evil god. And the players are seeing these signs of, again, you have a super low tides or even a tsunami, you have earth tremors, you have different things that point to these signs. And the way you do these prophecies, right, is to have them in this, and so it was told in the times of ancient that when this occurs and that and this, and the nations are split asunder, then the blood moon will come. And if you have a hard time writing those, you can use something like Chat GPT or something like that, any of those other ones, to come up with them. But something where the players have this prophecy in front of them and the events start to occur. There are omens, right? Things. And again, the prophets, the mad beggar is a great prophet. The old lady in the woods. Even if I was in a campaign once where there was a hag. She didn't eat children. We were like, she became sort of part of the fabric here, and we would actually kind of help her. She said she was on her best behavior. It was an interesting idea. But anyway, it wasn't something I would do necessarily, but I'm running in this world. And she had this power of prophecy. And it was really cool to, and she would describe different events, this different perspective. And this relates back to the mechanical side of omens and portents and how you can utilize them depending on the game system. If you have spells like augury or commune, You can use portents and prophecies instead of just saying, you feel like, there's going to be this blood moon coming and it's going to be really deadly or something like that. You can have a prophecy that when this occurs and that, look into the sky, you will see it drip red or something. And then the players investigate and discover, well, yeah, there was this phenomenon called the blood moon, but it's just a legend. It never really occurred, where the dead came to life and wreaked havoc. And the players are like, oh, I think it's real. And then, of course, you have skill checks. You have things like occultism or religion or arcana or history, where you're making checks on these things, and the players are using these to gain knowledge of different aspects of these omens and information. Say this prophecy talked of this land between the Dragon's Teeth Mountain, and the players see off in the distance what looks like Dragon's Teeth, or maybe it's just something familiar to them. But prophecies, omens, they're always in a cryptic sort of language that lends itself to giving them just enough information to get to the next thing and the next thing. And they also can give them information on if there's a ticking clock with this. If the birds come and then the animals all in the streets, whatever, and then there's rumbling and everything, and then the sun sets and it seems to hover over the Dragon's Teeth Mountain, you don't have much time before the blood moon. And what's going to happen and how can it be assuaged? Maybe you could stop the blood moon from occurring. And maybe it is merely if this wrong has been righted that this town did, the blood moon will not appear. Because again, you're dealing with a fantasy RPG game where anything can happen. So you could have a situation where I tend to think you're trying to mitigate the effects, but whatever you want to do. Because here's the thing, all of those things, the omens that the players can figure out, the prophecies, the signs that they can decipher using their skills makes them active and makes the knowledge unique to them. And then the fact that this event is going to occur that's sort of earth-shattering, they're the only ones that know about it. Or, maybe they go and talk to some wise, wizard or something, or patriarch, or however your system works, who warns them, yes. But I would tend to also, they must be the ones to go and discover this, whatever this, ancient temple they must find and get some artifact that will help assuage the blood moon. So they're the center of the universe. They're the linchpin. They're the protagonist and the antagonist of the world, as I always say. And that's what these prophecies and these omens and stuff, because there's time involved. There's time before the blood moon comes. And of course, if it does come and the players have not done this, how are you going to play that out? That's up to you. I would tend to have the undead rising everywhere and doing all sorts of stuff. And maybe the players, they all go into they get all the people in some village to be in a fortress, and you have some epic battle where the undead rise. And it's all their relatives, or, it's a field of soldiers from some great battle that were defeated by this kingdom, and now they're returning for one last attack. So it's a potential to do a large-scale battle. And they know when it's coming, when the blood moon is here. And you can set up that thing of after this thing and that, it's a few days. So I think you'll find these omens and prophecies and portents really fun to use. And a shout out to my Patreon supporters. This week I did The Hole, about a giant sinkhole that appears, and talked about how you introduce those to your world. And again, please like the video. I'd love to hear your comments on signs and portents you might have used. Most importantly, my friends, keep playing an RPG game, whichever system you choose, and tell somebody else about it.